All right, big money, no whammy. Let's see what we get when we do this. Who are we playing next? Oh, ogres. Interesting. I don't really think I've played them very much. So, okay, we're going to get real hungry and then we're going to stuff our faces with loving food. Nom nom nom. Meow, meow. Well, howdy ho there, folks. So, we're going to be playing a little bit of Ogre Kingdoms today. That's what we got on the Wheel of Warhammer, as we call it. Ooh, fancy. Ooh, aren't you scared of how fancy it is? It is very fancy. So I have a little bit of history with Ogre Kingdoms. They were actually one of the armies I had a physical army of on the tabletop. It wasn't a huge army, it was a fairly small ogre army, but I really enjoyed it. See, for some reason I really like painting flesh tones. I don't know what it is. I just really enjoy painting like lots of flesh tones on characters and throwing on like a little bit of body paint and stuff like that. So it's a lot of fun. Part of the reason I really like painting these guys and also really like painting beastmen. I never actually played them on the tabletop though. I had a fairly small army. I think it was like around 1,000 points, and I never actually got to play them except for one really kind of. It was basically an unofficial game with someone who never really plays Warhammer, and they wanted something really simple. And basically, I just used ogres, and he just used high up miniatures, and we just played a much simpler game. So I don't really think I have to count that one. But I really enjoy ogres for a lot of reasons. I like eating. When I was recording this, I had a big sandwich with me, and I was eating that and rather enjoying it. I'm not really super into a whole lot of the various other quote-unquote deadly sins, but gluttony could be one that would get me because I do love eating. I love snacking and grazing, and I restrict myself so I don't just constantly because nom nom nom. Know what I mean? Because otherwise I would just constantly eat forever and ever. Oh my gosh, but we managed to escape the hunger clap for me. Okay, there we go. It didn't want to go for a second there. Silly. But ogres in terms of first impression in this game, I think I briefly played Scrag the Slaughterer once for like 10 turns maybe. I can't remember exactly. But I will say that I just rather like big guys being able to like smash stuff and things like that. I think the thing that kind of threw me off, well, there were a couple of things that threw me off. You have to manage meat very closely and make sure that you have meat so that your army basically doesn't go crazy and go like, oh, well, we're just not going to follow your orders anymore. So I kind of made some mistakes in the first campaign I tried here where I wasn't getting as much meat. I was trying to replenish my losses. Turns out meat is way more important than replenishing the losses. So then I started doing more and more of that. There's also like a feast thing that you can do before combat, which gives you bonuses. And I think the big names thing is also pretty cool. I will say that ogres kind of go against my natural impulse because after I played for a little bit, before I switched to my second attempt, which I didn't do for very long, to be honest. People were saying that you really need to kind of loot things more, and of course the long-term goal in short is to loot a certain number of settlements and do things like that, or one of the goals is to do that. For me personally, I just don't really like doing that. I much prefer occupying settlements and expanding and having a big empire. And apparently you can do that, but I was getting kind of mixed results where people were saying that it's generally much better, especially early on, to like loot and raise settlements rather than occupying them. And I found that in my first playthrough, this eventually became very true because as I expanded, I eventually got to a point where I was right next to Grimgor Ironhide, and he was very angry and did a stomping on me. But no, ogres are fun. Ogres are pretty fun. I'm not really a fan of eating all the different kinds of peoples, which, I think I've said this before, but one of the big reasons I play Total War Warhammer and I play Warhammer games is because I want to engage in the fantasy. And usually I want to engage in and be kind of like a hero or a heroic figure, you know, being someone who's kind of there to help and try to build things up rather than someone that's just about distraction. Which is part of the reason why, for when I play Greenskins, I try to conquer a bunch and then like basically become these weird like peacekeepers. And I did download a mod that eliminates aversion, so I might do that with Greenskins again. They also didn't really have very many missile units, at least from the start. They don't, and it seemed like you could get a bunch of Noblars, but I don't know how effective they actually are. It seems like they're pretty not effective. To the point where I started to wonder, was there any reason to go with Noblars over just getting more Ogres? And as far as I can tell, and this is of course just first impressions basically, I couldn't really see any reason to go with Noblars over recruiting more Ogres after I played for a while. It just seemed like in general, Ogres were more useful, and I mean, of course, that makes a lot of sense. But it was almost like I almost got to a point where I was wondering why even bother recruiting Noblars. I'm assuming there's stuff you can do with them, especially if you upgrade them and do more later on, probably. I was going to say being surrounded immediately by, well, technically just two enemies, but having a bunch of enemies in my north immediately was a little bit different, and I wasn't really sure how I wanted to approach that. See, because once again, I tend to like to play in such a way where, you know, I'm trying to do good and I'm trying to not just break stuff. Although sometimes it is fun to break stuff, just like it's fun to eat things. But I also think that it was kind of funny, the faction there. I had a fire belly, and he kept talking about his flaming flatulence, and it's like, okay. I think these guys are very comedic in a lot of ways, and they're kind of scary too. I mean, like basically, it's like a 10 foot tall, what, maybe 800 pound, maybe half ton type dude just walking right up to you and then just, you know, trying to eat you. I wouldn't recommend it. Of course, if they try to eat me, then, you know, they just bite the fluff and then immediately they're just turned into more of me. So I'm not allowed at the ogre parties anymore. We've turned quite a few ogres into cats, and apparently we weren't supposed to do that because we're small and cute, and they want to be big and scary. And I'll be honest with you, most of them aren't that big and scary. It's amazingly easy to trip them. We found out that just throwing some ball bearings on the floor it's just so fast, just boom. And I mean, it's actually pretty funny. You can also lay out these really sticky traps. And depending on how smart the ogre is, they might just try to eat the traps, and then they get their mouths stuck with glue, and then they have to get your help anyway. It's very funny. I also do have the Ogre Kingdom's 6th edition and I guess 7th edition codex over there, and I really enjoy them as like a species and like as something that you throw in other things. I like the idea of being like an empire guy and having like an ogre mercenary and stuff like that. As a civilization, I feel like, if I'm just honest, the shtick gets a little old after a while. Just, and then we ate, and then we ate, and then we ate, and I understand. That's their thing, and I'm very glad that people enjoy that. But especially as I've gotten older and expanded my reading and expanded like the fantasy stuff I engage with, I just find that ogres are just not as interesting by themselves. I think they are much more interesting when you show them into other armies. Now, another thing that's kind of funny is, so in 6th edition, the dwarves had two army books. One was kind of technically a 7th edition army book, but it was basically like right at the tail end of 6th edition going into 7th edition, but it still gave you the ability to use dogs of war. And in the 6th edition Ogre Codex, I keep calling them codex, but they're army books, you know what I mean, whatever. There's a bunch of their units that are called dogs of war. So I had basically a 10,000 point dwarf army that then had, I think I basically turned what was a normal 1,000 point ogre army into just a ton of man eaters to give them a bunch of extra points. Oh, excuse me, yawn. But it was just like to add a bunch of extra points and some ogres into my dwarf army because it was really funny. There was also one time when I was playing dwarves on the tabletop, and I unit my thunderers, and if you don't know what a thunderer is, it's just a dwarf with a handgun. But a group of them got charged by, I think it was 6 ogre bulls, and they actually ended up beating them in combat because the ogre bulls rolled so poorly. I've just always thought that was really funny to just see the dwarves with their guns, not like basically just rifle butting people's knees until they fell down and they could rifle butt their heads in. I guess I don't know how it worked, but it was pretty fun. I have occasionally wanted to try ogres again on the tabletop. I've just never really gotten around to it. I don't know if I don't know anything about Old World really in terms of actually playing it. I haven't really looked at the rules. I haven't really looked at any of that. I will also say, me being kind of silly and not realizing that how important meat was, I had attrition going on later in one of the games, and I was like, why do I have attrition going on? And then I realized, oh wait, I had no meat. And you just like, you literally do need to be like constantly gathering meat or have like a continuous source of meat, or your army will just kind of fail. Well, not fail exactly, but they'll start to have attrition rates and stuff like that. I would highly recommend. Apparently, from what a lot of what I was reading and what I kind of experienced more in my second playthrough, was that you can get to be friends and trade with a lot of different people. There's also multiple abilities under Grease's Skulltooth, which allows you to have just better relations with the Ogre Kingdoms. And you take multiple of those, and you can just have friends all around you. And then attempt to, you know, you can cause confederations with other ogres, so that's kind of cool. I would also say that it's pretty useful, it seems, to try to make peace with the two factions you're against, or make peace against with the dwarves at least. It seems like that was very helpful. And then the dwarves became basically a buffer zone between me and Grimgore, which was kind of funny. I will also just take a moment just to say, I'm not really super big on the way they did ogres in Age of Sigmar, but mostly I just don't really know if I like the idea of Gork or Gorka Morka being like the one big destruction god and there not being like a maw. I kind of like the idea of the Great Maw. It's also kind of funny to just have the Great Maw down there. I don't even really know why you'd worship that. I mean, I guess it gives some people blessings, apparently. But I do find it kind of funny that they just like pour random meat and stuff into there. There's also this whole thing going on where like Greases seems like he's pretty intelligent, but a lot of the ogres are very clearly pretty dumb. And I don't know. I think once again that's kind of better, and almost like something like the Imperium, where it's like ogrins around other people, like being like, yeah, they're kind of dumb, but like by being around these other people, they have like more use, and they just kind of have more interesting interactions. Because it kind of seems like when it's just ogres, it's just me big, me bigger, and then they punch, and then one of them is bigger, I guess. You know. Also the art in the 6th edition army book is great. I really like the art in the 6th edition army book. But honestly, I think in most cases the 6th edition army books are just fantastic. If you can find them, they're really worth it. The artwork alone is really good. So what I'll say, kind of in conclusion, in terms of an army, I don't really think Ogre Kingdoms are my style. I tend to like building up a big empire. I also tend to like making friends early on. Now, I think they can do both of those, but I think part of it is that the fantasy is just not as much there because these guys are mostly more about like clubbing and beatings things. And I don't know, for some reason it's easier for me to suspend that when it's greenskins versus when it's ogres, and I don't know what it is. It's also I think that they're not bad, but I think it was kind of weird because I'm not 100% sure what my exact mistake was in my first playthrough. But at a certain point, basically, what ended up happening is uh, Grimgore just came just a tumbling down on me, and I really had no real way to beat him. I think part of it was that I was not actually doing great at maintaining my army. So I'm going to suggest if you're playing these guys, partially just because you start with a bunch of people around you who are going to attack you, it's probably a good idea to A, maintain a secondary army, and B, make sure that you know, you have plenty of stuff going back and forth, that sort of thing. I would also say it's kind of funny because every time I look at Greasus, I'm just kind of like, it just looks like the mobility scooter from hell, really. I just don't know. Just, and then it's a Walmart, and he rams into the Walmart. He gets the Mr. Pibb. You cannot prevent him from getting the Mr. Pibb. But, you know, I'm so glad I tried him out, you know, and I'm enjoying trying out the various different factions. But my first impression is, like my first impression when I first tried Cathay, I was like, you know, I think I kind of like Cathay. I think I could definitely see getting more into this and see doing more stuff with it. My first impression with Ogre Kingdom was just, I think I'd rather play Orcs and Goblins if I was going to play something kind of like this. Like if I was going to play something that's more like warlike and I guess tribal might be the word we might use there, I would probably end up going with greenskins if I was just choosing. I could try Scrag the Slaughter, and if I get Ogre Kingdoms again, I'll try Scrag the Slaughter. But yeah, just wasn't super into it. There's a couple of neat things, like you could see the throne there, that's kind of cool, and I really liked seeing the Great Maw. But yeah, not super my thing. I like some of their miniatures. I like stuff like that. But I ended up not doing the greatest with them, and I think that also had part to do with it. Well, let me skip forward. That's weird. Why won't it let me skip forward? Well, I ended up winning this fight, and it was kind of fun. Basically, what ended up happening is they just charged in, and then I just kind of sat there and armored up and did some stuff like that. It's weird. It's not letting me move that thing, the timer at all. But hey, it's not that big of a deal. I think it's also like one of the things I'm just gonna mention is that like I try to imagine my life as like maybe a big ogre, and I'm just kind of like, this just seems unpleasant. It's like I don't even get the fantasy feeling like, oh man, I get to live in this cool, weird area with all this cool stuff. It's like, no, it just seems kind of unpleasant. Kind of like Skaven, but I love Skaven, and they're cute, and I just have a version of them in my head that is like less evil. Even though I know, like, if we're going strictly by like Warhammer canon, they're definitely not good guys. But anyway, I think I would definitely be willing to give them another shot, and if there's maybe some suggestions or something that people would throw out there, I would definitely like to see that. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, thanks for so much for stopping by. I love you and God loves you, and I hope you have a great one. And I'm gonna put out more Total War content here. I think Saturdays might be another Total War day. I'm gonna have to figure that out exactly. But yeah, for right now, I gotta figure out what faction to play on that. Anyway, thanks so much for stopping by. I love you. God loves you. Bye. But bye. I love you. Bye.